Okay, cool. Thanks, Luke. Thanks, everyone. It's really cool to be here. We hear lots about you guys as well. So obviously my lovely mum and dad are good talkers because we all seem to know lots about each other. So that's cool. Now we've been thrown a curveball today. If you're a baseball fan, you know what that is. We've been asked to share about male-female relationships or romantic relationships. And I think my dad, about 25 years ago, I borrowed my dad's car one day, and I was out for a drive with one of my friends, and I rolled the car. And it was a mess. In fact, the pictures of us standing next to the car afterwards, my friend and I, both with one little scratch on our hand here, were just sort of kind of like a little miracle in snapshot of just seeing us there smiling, looking really happy next to this crumpled car that was upside down. And I think afterwards, my dad, as a good parent does, said, you're going to need to pay for some of the damage, and I think that's what this invitation was about today. So this is him just getting his own back, and it's good. Be good to settle that score today. We want to introduce you right at the beginning to three biblical words, three Hebrew words for love. So, Mandy, can you just... Oh, hang on. We've got a clicker. Hey, this is fancy. Where do I point this towards? I didn't ask that. Anywhere? Fantastic. Okay. So, let's come back to this one. The first of these words is the word raya. Any Hebrew scholars in the room can just give us the correct pronunciation. And this is really like the love for a best friend, a companion, a soulmate. You will all have examples of this in your life. Someone who you feel really comfortable in their presence. You have similar interests. It's just, you look forward to spending time with them. It's just great, and it's fun. It's a whole combination of things that add richness to your life. Okay, the second one is called dode. This is the second Hebrew word, and this is the kind of love that we experience in romance. And when we have intimacy with someone, it's a very passionate love, a physical love. And a physical love and a bit more, that whole sense of that attraction and chemistry that you have with someone. The third one is called ahava. Ahava is a deep, unconditional commitment. It's kindness. It has perseverance in it. It has this constant, ongoing favor towards the other person. That's called ahava. Now, I want to tell you a little story. Once upon a time, there was a man and a woman who lived in the same town. They had heard each other's names dropped into conversations, but they'd never met. She was beautiful and intelligent, confident, gracious, warm. He was talented, but reclusive and unsure. Reclusive means he liked to hang out by himself, didn't get out very much. The day they met lived long in his memory. He was struck by her beauty and her warmth. She was intrigued, that means curious. She was curious enough to agree to meet him again. They often met in the weeks which followed, and their love for each other grew. There was romance that seemed magical, and there was friendship too. They liked similar books, they shared common interests, they both loved cricket. They shared ideas that they had in common. They had different interests too, which exposed each one to things in the world that they'd never seen before or come across. When they could, they cancelled other commitments and appointments to make time to spend together. They made plans too. There were things they wanted to do in the world, and they saw that they could do them together. The man noticed that his life was different and that he had confidence he had never had before. And he had grown from sharing his struggles with her and being accepted by her. The future looked bright. But the man's pride got in the way. He looked around for what else he could get that was more than he already had. He wondered what else he could achieve with his new confidence. And their love was strained. They stopped seeing each other, and there was sadness for them both. Agonizing months passed before he came to his senses and longed to be with her again. Would it be too late to repair what he had broken? This is a story about someone I know, and a woman I know too, who's standing not far from me right now. The area of male and female relationships can feel a bit like a minefield. And for some of you here today, you're in a relationship, and hopefully some of what we have today will give you pause for thought, or something that actually connects with something you're experiencing going through. Some of you may be single and thinking, how does this work? Or I tried this once and it wasn't very easy. Or I'm hopeful this might happen, but is it like this minefield that I'm describing? Hopefully in some way, there'll be some things in this talk that will connect with everyone with where you are, and we want to make it a little bit interactive. So we're going to put up a slide, thanks Mandy, sorry, I can do this bit, I keep forgetting. Mandy needs to do the next bit. Okay, so we want to make this a little bit interactive. We'd like to know what sort of things most interest you and what things connect with stuff that you're going through in your life and your relationships. So we're going to ask for you to select something for us to begin with, and we'll see where we get to. We may not get time for all the boxes, and we'll try to keep things relatively packaged for each one so that we can sort of get through a few different things. Sound okay? All right. So, what are we thinking? Any volunteers want to point out something that we could start with? Do you want me to read these to you? Would you read these, Ange? Oh, here we go. Len. Yep. Are we too different? Is this me or you? Okay. Now, you guys have some of you will have experience of this that is on a different level from most of us, because a cross-cultural relationship has some complexity to it that isn't there if you just marry the neighbor who you grew up alongside and have a very similar culture to. But let's talk about this question. Part of the reason our relationship works, and mine, is because of our shared interests. We love travel and other cultures. We love food, and I mentioned cricket. We love watching international films together. We met partly because of a common interest in theology, and Angela being a student in one of my dad's theology classes. We had and have lots of overlap. This is the raya bit of the three terms we gave you. Now, one of the ways we think of this is a little bit like, if you think of something a bit like the shape of a funnel. So if you think of it being sort of narrower at one end and wider at another end. So if you have that image in your mind, you can see how on one side there is a greater distance or a bigger range of things that need to connect between two people who are different. But there is also the chance of enriching each other. So Angela and I have these things in common. We also have things where we are very different. So for instance, to begin with, men and women are quite different in some ways. As a generalization, we can be quite distinctive in the way we do things. Men can be quite brief in their description of things, and women can be quite detailed. In the early stages of our marriage, I very much showed that male tendency to be a fixer. And if something came up that Ange was going on in her life, could have been to do with her or something at work or anything, that my male brain would want to fix the thing that she was talking about. But that isn't really what a woman's looking for. She doesn't really want her man to fix everything. She wants to know if he's on her side. And that's quite different. So, in our view, even just on this one plane that we're talking about here, this one aspect, our lives have a chance of being massively enriched by each other. Maybe that'd be good.
So while we're talking about our interests being in common, the other thing is the personality. So Tim and I, we're not miles apart. We have some sort of intersecting places in our personality. For example, we're both sort of maybe feelings-oriented people rather than extremely logical, calculated. So, not to say that he isn't clever, but we both feel our feelings. But other than that, Tim's definitely more of an introvert, needs more of his own space and time. It's a little bit hard to achieve when you have children, but that's still something he really craves. Whereas I don't need a lot of time alone. I'm happy just being with people, and so that's one area we're a little bit different. Also, Tim is a lot more open-minded in a sense that he won't make a quick decision about something. He wants to be open to a lot of possibilities. He doesn't want to shut something off. He wants to explore and see what will come. I'm probably a little bit more pragmatic in that I want to probably just make a decision and get the thing done, or make up my mind about something. That's just my personality. The other thing is Tim is quite a conceptual thinker. He could spend all day talking about things which you really, you have to kind of know, it's hard to explain, but he's got a lot of ideas, and I'm probably more of a doer. So, so in that way we're different. I'm probably more looking at the details of something, probably the real physical aspect of something. I love gardening and cooking and anything that's quite, earthy. And Tim loves to just discuss, well, I do too, but yeah, Tim particularly thrives on discussing anything, broad and clever. So in that way, we have different personalities. We are not the same, but our job over the years is to try to understand where that person's coming from and understand what their needs are. It's not good enough for us to just say, well, you're just too different from me, I just don't get you, because we are committed to each other and we're in it for the long term. So we want to get the most out of this relationship. We need to understand who we are and who that other person is.
So do you get that picture? So if you think of the funnel, you're basically taking in more of the world together than you would on your own. You're exposing each other, expanding each other's world. But it creates that challenge too. So what we've found, and this is a useful little, I think, idea to keep in your mind, finally on this slide, is at the beginning, these things that attract you to someone, you know how often it is that opposites attract, right? Like you can end up being with someone that's very similar to you, but very often we are drawn to someone who is actually quite different to us. And that is, we love that. That's part of what makes it work and part of where the attraction is in the first place. What can happen when there are challenges which come up in a relationship is you can turn that around, and the differences that you love about someone can become the thing you see that you find difficult. So Ange, as she was sort of describing, is very grounded. She's very much in the real world, and I'm a daydreamer. And I love what has happened to my life being with Ange, because I am just more connected to the actual real world, and that has been a massive blessing for me. If we're having a bad week, that can become, why are you so focused on this thing that needs to be done right now? Can you see how the dynamic works? So this thing that you love about the other person the same trait can become sort of the other side of the coin, can become something that becomes a challenge. So there's something that we leave with you on that. Any comments or questions on that? We may not have hit very well on some of the difficulties that can come up when your backgrounds are so different, but maybe a couple of those rules of thumb will be helpful.
Yeah, I think the same principle applies, that if you're wanting to be in a longer term relationship with somebody and they are different, we have to understand that different cultures will have different ways of thinking, worldview, ways of doing things, and perhaps they're not even aware of it themselves, and we ourselves are not aware of our influence, our culture's influence on our worldview. So it's really our responsibility to try and look from outside at ourselves and see, how we operate, and to learn about the other person and how they operate, and not make a judgment about it, because no one culture is better than the other. So we're not making any judgment on that, but if we want that relationship, which will be enriching, then we must work a bit harder at it.
I think we'll see in a couple of the other slides as well how the ahava can and does transform the relationship that you have. And I think it relates to this, just to see the dynamic of how that works. So we'll come back to it. Okay. What else? Thanks, Lynn, for getting us started.
Yes.
So with these differences, how do we stop arguments that come up with these differences in personalities?
Do we want to go to...
Can you repeat that question?
So the question was, with all these differences, how do we kind of resolve, I suppose, the arguments that come up surrounding that? Where's our question?
We'll look at the arguments one and then come back and see if it kind of makes sense.
Are you happy for us to go into this one? How can we stop? Yeah.
So how can we stop, thanks Mandy, how can we stop having arguments? Oh, what happened there? Sorry, you might have to click the picture, not the words. That was a bit of a technical issue there. Here we go. Okay, so how can we stop having arguments? I'm going to give you a 2-word answer to this, and then a slightly longer one as well. What have I done with my notes? Here we go. So, yeah, if you can use that while I'm talking, thanks. My practical wife is going to raise the lectern so that I can actually read it. So the 2-word answer to this, can we stop having arguments, is you can't. You can't stop having arguments. Or perhaps another possibility is to say you shouldn't. So what do I mean by this? There are 2 quite common outcomes in a relationship, according to research, according to our own experience, according to what we hear other people saying. And the 2 common experiences that 2 couples in a close relationship have are lots and lots of difficult conflict, or no conflict at all. And surprisingly, according to the research and the way that relationships work, neither of these is very good. Which is kind of surprising, isn't it? Because you would think, conflict, like that can't be a good thing in a relationship. We want to have no conflict. Well, actually, we need some conflict in our relationships. So that sort of reframes the question a little bit. Research shows that couples who don't argue are not necessarily the couples who stay together or who stay happy. Sometimes our rows, our arguments, reveal to the other person in a unique way what is really important to the other person. Reveals to us what is really important to the other person. What they really care about, what pushes their buttons, what makes them tick. These things have a way of coming out in an argument that they don't necessarily always reveal themselves just in normal conversation. If you never engage in conflict, you may be choosing not to reveal yourself or to stay safe or to stay independent, which of course is not the idea of a healthy working relationship. So let's put that onto one side, that the aim is not to have zero conflict with your partner. Is that okay? Is that no pushback there? We can live with that for now. But what that means is for the people who are regularly having conflict, they're kind of saying, oh, well, okay, that sounds good. I'm suddenly seeing that we're not necessarily the baddies here. We're sort of doing something okay. But if it's damaging conflict, then of course that's going to hurt the relationship. So how do we do healthy conflict? Is that middle sort of zone that is quite hard to find for most of us. I'm a conflict avoider, and some relationships have one of these in them. And I would rather that things were kind of just smooth and peaceful than sort of having drama coming up all the time. So this can quite often be the guy perspective, but it's definitely not.
Not true.
Definitely not always that way. Definitely not always that way. So we need like a toolbox. We need something that can help us in these everyday situations. Some things that are practical that can shape the way that we engage with each other, because there'll be emotion and there'll often be a lot of deep feeling, like we're saying. But these things we've found can be incredibly helpful at having some conflict without it being damaging to the other person. So use I, not you. So just think of some examples when you're really upset and how often you want to say, and it's sort of start by talking about how you are experiencing it. Means that you're not pushing the other person into a corner. Be clear, be honest, express your feelings. Okay, so sometimes in our sort of defensiveness in an argument, we come out on the attack and we don't realize what that's doing to the other person and how much our words are actually making things worse. And along with sort of the I and you tip is this idea to avoid using always and never. Talk about what's happening today. Don't say, you never, ever, ever do the dishes. Because they'll just think of the time 3 Tuesdays ago that they did. So, Ange, were you going to add something?
Just give an example like that one. Then instead you could say something like, Tim, I feel really taken advantage of when I'm the one who has to do the dishes a lot. You're not saying never, not saying always. Mm-hmm. I feel, or I feel hurt, or I feel unsupported, or something like that. So you're using a word that he can't say, well, no, you can't feel that. You're not allowed to feel that. So it's a feeling that must be acknowledged, but then you can start to work through how you can resolve that together. How can we make this situation better? Yeah.
Now, a little tip that I've learnt the hard way and continue to learn is that when my wife says, I feel really pressured right now, and I feel really busy, and I feel like I'm doing a lot of stuff, and it's too much for me. My male brain wants to go, I've just suddenly thought of 4 things that would really help to fix that situation. And I think that, aren't I being great and helpful, because now some of these issues are going to be fixed, when a lot of the time, the huge majority of the time, what Ange really wants is just to know if I'm listening and I'm on her side and I'm really paying attention to what's going on for her. Let's be honest, it's actually a lot easier than coming up with 5 or 10 different things we're going to try to make it, to fix it. But often as guys, and I'm not saying all of you in this category, but some of us are, we just don't go there very easily. And part of what we're doing when we really pay attention is we're recognizing that actually, yeah, I can be part of this, and I might be able to be part of sort of helping make things work. And sometimes it's that the other person actually already has some good ideas about how to fix this, and they just were looking for that sense that we're still here on the same side, and we can work on this together.
Do you want to talk about the myth?
Yeah. So, should we I might finish, did you have something else on that one? So, yeah, so the myth, we've got a few myths we're going to discuss in a few minutes around the tables, just to see, let you guys get some of your thoughts out in discussion with each other. But this is the myth relating to arguments. If the relationship is right, there won't be any hard work or conflict. Actually, conflict is often what really you can often, after some healthy conflict, there can be an amazing closeness and dynamic and strength in the relationship afterwards.
Could I just add that sometimes we do get stuck perhaps in a pattern of unhealthy conflict. If that's the case, don't just battle it out together. I really advise in those situations that you might need to talk with somebody else. It's extremely helpful. It doesn't mean your relationship is, doomed if you go to a counsellor. A trusted, wise friend. It is so much better to just talk about those issues with a person who can help objectively to help you sort of, untwist the knots. And see it as a thing that will help you move forward, not as a negative thing.
How's our time? Okay? What else do you see on the board that might be good to discuss? Yeah.
Is it possible for everyone to have the three kinds of love, or some people are more able to have just one or two types? Because sometimes you feel guilty that you deal very well in your work environment, but you not deal very well in your place with your family, for example. Can maybe you explain a little bit about that?
We knew we'd get some tough questions. That is a really great question. I think that some of these, I think that some of the expressions of love which make relationships work are very much in our hands, so to speak, that we can get involved and work at them. Some things are, what I want to say is, love isn't just something we do, it's also something that happens to us. So it's the combination of the two things. If love is just gritting your teeth and bearing it and carrying on, then it's not going to last too long. I mean, it's going to be strained, it's going to be difficult. So there has to be that sense of receiving something. That's a very general answer, but that's kind of a rule of thumb that I think sometimes we can get on one side or the other. We can say, oh, well, this isn't happening for me in this relationship. It doesn't make me feel good, so I'm not going to do anything. That's not going to work very well. And on the flip side, just being someone who's doing it by determination is also, I think, not sustainable. It's not going to last a long time. Any thoughts, Ange?
Oh yeah, I mean, just there are always like a few sort of practical things, I guess, that you can do to input into that relationship if you want to experience more of like, for example, maybe a couple gets married and they realize when they're married, they have the commitment, maybe they had the passion that Dode love, maybe they didn't work so much on the friendship love, and now they need to work out how they're going to find something in common. Start with one thing, see where it goes, but just look for those things in common that can build a friendship in the same way that you could build a friendship with a friend. Or if you've married and you have that friendship love already, perhaps you're missing the dode. There are also, you could just Google. You could find probably endless ways to help increase romantic love in a relationship. I think the commitment, the ahava that Tim's talking about, that is almost something that we just can't, as Tim said, manufacture. We need God's help in that because it is such a sort of sacrificial love. Gritting your teeth is not going to produce it. We just need God's help in that. But the other two, perhaps you can learn from other people, from resources, how you can improve those things.
Yeah, you might have specific examples in mind. I guess it's very different depending on which one of those things you feel is kind of missing for someone.
I feel like with you can grow from friendship love into passionate love. You can grow from passionate love into friendship love. It's not like you've only got that one. There is no possibility. You can grow into these loves as well as you. The more and more I spend time with Tim as my friend, the more my other love for him grows. It's an ongoing thing.
Okay. And is there something you want to get into some of the things that you feel you definitely want to miss? Could be a bit like
If he or she is the right one.
you feel like you said most of the things you really absolutely want to
That bottom one is probably the only one.
Oh, the right one.
Where is that? Thank
Yeah,
you.
thanks.
Thank
We were
you.
just wondering about that one.
Great.
Yep, cool.
Okay. Cool.
Thanks, Mandy. So how do we know if she is the right one? Oh, sorry. It's just that picture thing again.
So I guess deep down is a question here. Is there the one? Is there just one person that God has chosen for us? I would suggest not. I think if there is only one right person, we put a lot of pressure on ourselves, on the other person, and on that decision that we might make to have this relationship. So then when things get tough later on, maybe you start to question, was this really the person that God told me to marry, or something like that? Maybe I heard wrong. Maybe now I'm not living within God's will. I would suggest instead that we think of the earth that He has created and the way of our lives, that He expects us to be decision makers, that He expects us to participate in our lives and to use our creative minds that He's given us to involve ourselves in the decision. But He hasn't left us alone to sort of just muddle through. He gives us His wisdom, His presence in our decision making. Here's a couple of words on His wisdom. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and knowledge of the Holy One is understanding. That's from Psalms and Proverbs. But if any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask God, who gives to all generously and without reproach, and it will be given to him. From James. But it is due to him that you are in Christ Jesus, who became to us wisdom from God. From 1 Corinthians. So, given that God has offered us this wisdom, can we just rephrase the question instead of asking, is this person the one? Can we ask, does this person suit me? Do I suit them? Will our lives be enriched together? Will we bless others by our joining together? So we're not focused on the one, because that's almost like you're relying on everything aligning to work out. In this way, by seeking God for his wisdom about who we would do well with, or who we would do well as a couple, we will then live out a life that is reflective of who he's created us to be, created for love towards each other, created for love outward to other people. We're not just created for a love relationship with each other that has no impact on others. In fact, you know, our love relationships within marriage or family are meant to radiate. They're meant to spread outwards. So,
I was just going to throw in there that, so one thing we're not saying here is, we're not saying you can just never be sure. Like, you know, I don't know, should we just give this a try? Like, that isn't what we're saying. But what we're saying, so I was sure that I wanted to marry Angela. I was convinced, and I wasn't kind of looking around to see, you know, should this go ahead or not. But there's a difference between that kind of I'm sure and convinced, and that thing we call certainty, which doesn't require me to involve myself, doesn't require me to put myself into the situation, because, you know, God wrote it in the stars that I'm meant to be with this person, so I can, you know, it doesn't really matter what I do now, because it's all just sort of done, isn't it? So if you can sort of try and see that distinction, we think that that's really important, that's a lot part of where the ahava comes in, because you're actually giving yourself, and giving yourself is part of what makes it work. And it can't work if you're not giving yourself, if that makes sense.
did you want to talk about your experience the weekend away?
Yeah. So the little story I told at the beginning. So what happened at the end of that story? I was reflecting on this actually just recently while we were trying to put some of these thoughts together and going back to think through that stage in our relationship. And I got to the point one weekend where Mum and Dad had a place at that stage at the beach up north of Auckland, and the place was free that weekend. I managed to, you know, sort of have a clear diary for a whole weekend, and I thought, what I'm going to do is I'm going to fast and pray, and I won't eat anything for the weekend, and by the end, God will have told me what the right thing is to do. So, good plan. And at the end of the weekend, God hadn't told me what to do. Could he have told me what to do? He could have. But he didn't. And what did happen in the process of all my soul, and I was changing the way that I saw how I was in the relationship with Ange. So was I given an instruction or a certainty or a thing that allowed me to go, great, there's no risk anymore? It's all been decided. Well, that didn't happen, but in the process of our searching, God is gracious, and he gives us just what we need to be loving and committed, and all the resources that we need to participate and be involved, but also to receive from him what we need. So yeah, that was my experience.
Just to add, perhaps I tried to think through yesterday or a few days ago what it was, where was the moment that I knew that Tim was the person I wanted to be with. And reflecting back, I really felt I couldn't pinpoint exactly when or how or where that I felt I definitely wanted to spend my life with Tim. I think I just really enjoyed him, I admired him, and I trusted him. We always had heaps to talk about, so I knew I'd never be bored. But the things, like, these are the things that, made me certain. But of course, everyone has their own things. So the things that made me comfortable committing to Tim are not necessarily the same things that you'll find important.
The verse that just came to my mind was the one, it's in John 7, and there's a group of, this is sort of a related idea, there's a group of disciples or a group of members of the crowd, they may have even been, I can't remember if they were Pharisees or not, and they come to Jesus and they say, look, we're so interested in everything that you're saying, we want to commit to you, but we just need to know if you are who you say you are. So just lay it all out for us. We're here, we're ready. Just prove it to us and make it so that it's completely 100% certain, and then we'll follow you. And Jesus says, follow me, and then you'll know. And I think that's what happens in a relationship. Involve yourself in the relationship, and then you'll know. Pull back from the relationship and examine it from the side, and you won't know, because the relationships don't work that way. It feels like we've been here a long time. Should we go for some discussion, or any burning questions? Or there's a few things we haven't talked about, but I feel like there's maybe enough things that you might have in your mind that you can discuss around tables, or...
Did we have talk about the myths? We've only talked about a few myths.
We didn't, yeah. Yeah. So some of the myths that are on the pages that you're going to have in front of you when you're discussing came up in other parts of the slide up here, which we haven't touched on. I think they make sense. Perhaps we can circulate a little bit while the discussion's going on in case there's one or two of those that aren't too clear. A little bit more? Okay, sure. Okay, so we'll just do a few more minutes.
Has anyone got a question from here? We've still got a few that haven't been chosen.
Mandy, that's should a man and woman be equal in a relationship?
You're going to click, yeah?
Yeah, but yeah, there we go.
Okay, so we've got the...
Oh, is it? Cool. Is this you, Ben?
Okay, so I'm sure nothing in that first sentence is new to you. Men and women are both created in the image of God and are both equal in value and worth. However, men and women sometimes take on different roles. For example, the woman does the childbearing. There's no getting around that. Sometimes they take on similar roles. Maybe before they have children, they're both very involved in their careers. There are differing theological views about the best way to view these roles. We were unaware until a few years ago that there were even titles for what sort of belief you had about the roles that you take in a relationship. However, there are different views, but we personally don't think that that's our job to prescribe the way that it should be done. But I want to emphasize that it just must be talked about in the relationship. You all will come into the relationship with an assumption. You may not be aware that you're coming in with an assumption. For example, my sister married an English man who expected that she would do his ironing. So she asked all of us, her friends, and me, do you do your husband's ironing? And none of us said we did. Because we all have very lovely and useful husbands that can do their own ironing. But it's just because he had grown up in a house where his mother did the father's ironing. So, I mean, there's nothing wrong one way or the other. The only wrong thing is when you don't discuss this together and bring it out into the open and come up with something that you agree on together. Woohoo! That's great. Never too late to change the way that you've done things, is it? So I think that's just what I want to emphasize, that you just must talk about these things. You will have assumptions about what the other person will do, what you will do. For some time now, I've been doing most of the cooking, Tim's been doing most of the dishes, and it's just sort of slotted in that way. But we're always open for negotiation. Sometimes Tim will say, well, you've been doing a lot of the cooking, I could do some, and sometimes I'll be like, oh, you've done the dishes every night this week, I'll do them. So, you just keep it out in the open, keep talking about it. Not talking about it will guarantee you to lead to resentment. You will resent that somebody is expecting you to do a certain thing if they haven't either asked you about doing it or asked you if you feel comfortable continuing in that way. So just talk. Communication. Yeah, and I think it's just really up to the individual couple in all of those situations where you come to an arrangement, because maybe for the partner who earns a lot of money and the other one doesn't, maybe money is not important to that person who is capable of earning a lot, and they would rather be the person who is at home with the children or whatever. It just needs to be discussed again, I think, and if both of your goal is to really be financially secure, maybe you do just both need to work, but you need to talk about that. If money is not such an issue, then you're open, flexible. But I don't think it gives anyone an elevated status. Perhaps that's part of the question. I don't think that because you earn more money than the other partner, that you have a higher status, or that you have automatically, therefore, the right to work. You still need to discuss that, because the other person's work is also valid.
I'll just say, I think just a little bit of that relates to the question up there about when is the right time to commit. So I think that, to summarize it, I would say that when there is what we call mutuality, when you are equally exchanging together, and the combination is a blessing to each person. I think that sometimes maybe that isn't there, but we sort of hope that maybe it might just happen eventually down the road. Or, it'll be fine once we're married. I think some of that obviously does get stronger with the marriage, but I think the signs and the nature of it is there, even just when you are, even before you're married. So let's just finish with some verses. So if we go down a little. I think we touched on a little bit of that earlier. I don't have to go through it all. Sorry, I'll just flick through here to the end. Did I not put that up on a slide? Maybe I didn't. Okay. I'll have to read it out to you. Okay, well-known verses, but I think just wherever we're at in a relationship, these verses are just gold for giving us something we can do today, that we can get involved in, and that really can, in an ongoing way, be transforming in a relationship. Love is something which we have quite a lot of intuition about, I think, and we know sort of how it works. We know how to be a friend to someone. We know how to be loyal to someone. We come to romantic relationships, and sometimes, for some of us, maybe Hollywood is the brain, maybe it's a variety of things. We put it in this different category of something that is maybe out of our control, or something that is not very, that I can't do anything about. But the three loves and the way the Bible talks about how those work together and create if you think of the image of like flames or of like a fire that's burning, they work together and create something that makes a relationship grow. So what are these verses in 1 Corinthians? What are these familiar verses? Love is patient. Love is kind. Love is not envious or boastful or arrogant or rude. It doesn't insist on its own way. It's not irritable or resentful. It does not rejoice in wrongdoing, but rejoices in the truth. It bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Love never ends. Cool. Okay, so there are 3 discussion questions in front of you on your tables. One of them relates to these, but I think they're written in the same way on your paper. If you can't see a paper, then they're up here. Enjoy the discussion, and if questions come up or you still would like us to answer something, then just call us up.
Yeah, and just, of course, we're not the experts. Like, everyone knows somebody who's in a happy relationship, a well-functioning relationship. If you do need advice and help, please just ask those people. Ask anyone, one of the leaders, or Gordon and Barbara have got lots of pearls of wisdom. Anytime.
Thank you, Tim and Angela. We're going to have worship now, and because we've really enjoyed Tim and Angela talking, we're going to, after the worship, we're going to have a brief discussion of just 5 minutes, just because of our schedule. But over lunch, keep talking about these things, and I would also suggest perhaps in small groups during the week where the opportunity arises, keep talking about these kinds of things, because it's very, very important. Thank you.
Tim and Angela, shall we stand up and start our worship? Our first song will be Change My Heart, O God. Change my heart, O God. Change my heart, O God. Make it ever true. Change my heart, O God. May I be like you. You are the potter, I am the clay. Mold me and make me. This is what I pray. Change my heart, oh God. Make it ever true. Change my heart, oh God. May I be like you. Change my heart, oh God. Change my heart, oh God. Make it ever true. Change my heart, oh God. Change my heart, oh God. May I be like you. You are the potter, I am the clay. Mold me and make me. This is what I pray. Change my heart, oh God. Make it ever true. Change my heart, oh God. May I be like you. 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 Brothers